Anyways, I want to watch one more on Concord since so many people wanted to hear my opinion on it for some reason. I don't really think that I am like this voice of much with video games, I guess. Like I don't have like super in-depth knowledge of things, but I'll go down this rabbit hole. This one is from Hero Hey. And it is called Concord employees caught bragging before shutdown. Like what? I don't understand how you would brag before this just sounds like such a weird premise, so I wanna understand what the heck happened.
So a ton of new information has just been released about Concord, including the actual cost of the game, which is apparently about $400 million.
That's insane. I heard that recently and I was like, what the heck? How?
Their rough estimates were between 50 million to 150 million USD. So if this figure's accurate,
yeah, that's insane. They're like, oh no, they might have spent 50 million to 100 million USD, and now they're like, no, actually they spent 400 million.
Then it's significantly
Somehow.
worse. This also seems to make Concord Sony's largest failure ever. Amplifying that loss is that Concord apparently had the largest budget out of any Sony game that they've ever made to date. And
why? Like, this is the crazy thing. Why in the world did they have such a big budget on this? My only guess is that it was because it was supposed to be launched on the PS5's like new thing. Like it was supposed to be the like showcase for the game, for the for the console.
And that Sony even thought this could be their version of Star Wars, hoping to profit off Concord long into the future. That's just a quick summary of some of the new information presented by Colin Moriarty. In a clip he posted that's just over 8 minutes long. He'll go over some of this stuff in more detail and we'll also further talk about this. And then I have another source that I also want to show you too. Now,
what made them think they would need this exponentially large amount of money, like compared to any other game that they've had? Like, why does this one need more of a budget so much?
That takes us to this tweet where Colin Moriarty says, I spoke extensively with someone who worked on Concord, and it's so much worse than you think.
Oh no.
It was internally referred to as the future of PlayStation, with Star Wars-like potential, and a dev culture of
the future of PlayStation. See, I told you they were trying to like launch it with the game to up sales for the PlayStation. That was my guess. That's so crazy.
toxic positivity halted any negative feedback, making it cost $400 million. And now before I start playing what I view as some of the highlight areas of the clip, I've actually got a little more of a summary to go over, that being about the first 4 minutes of the clip, since I can just recap this pretty dang quick. But like I also mentioned, some of this we will break down in further detail. So the clip begins with him talking about this anonymous source of his, where he essentially says that someone who worked on Concord approached him, and he spent a great amount of time checking and confirming that that person is who they say they are.
Okay, so he's interviewing somebody that works for the company?
After that, he goes on to talk about the financial situation and that $400 million figure as mentioned. It sounds like by 2023, around $200 million was already spent on Concord, and that was—
Whoa, like what did they even have that cost this much that early on?
Before Sony purchased Firewalk Studios. After Sony acquired Firewalk, they spent another $200 million on the game. All of that simply to get the game to minimum viability. It sounds like before Sony got involved, Firewalk was already a giant mess, doing who the heck knows what with the $200 million that they already had. Because
yeah, it's like, what in the world did they need this budget for? Like, where was it going?
Game was apparently in a pathetic state. Although, of course, we already know how the end product also ended up being, but yeah. Okay, now with the first 4 minutes or so summarized, I'll let parts of the clip speak for itself.
The game cost about $400 million to make, soup to nuts. Sony put most of that money—
What does soup to nuts mean? I'm sorry, that's not part of the conversation. What does soup to nuts mean? What is that expression? It's a slang term for start to finish? Okay. I've never heard that one. Sorry, that really threw me off. Okay, learn something new every day.
And it is not only so, because we had kind of said, like, this must be Sony's biggest loss ever on a game, and it is. It's the biggest game Sony's ever released from a budgetary standpoint from the first party or second party. So let that sink in.
It's crazy.
And it's totally unintuitive. There are games that are in development right now at Sony first and second party that are more expensive than this.
Oh no, wait. So this isn't even the biggest— There's other games in development that cost more than this? That's what he said, right?
Sink in.
It's crazy.
And it's totally unintuitive. There are games that are in development right now at Sony first and second party that are more expensive than this.
How? Why?
But as of the games that have come out so far, so think about like Spider-Man 2, and so on and so forth. We know The Last of Us Part 2 cost $220 million. Spider-Man 3 is going to cost about $350 million. This game costs more than that. And they lost all of it.
So far, all right. I haven't heard what that money is even for. It seems like they just roll a D20 and that's like the number they go with. I'm so confused.
Because they made no money. They made about $1 million gross revenue. And then they gave it all back. So this is a huge, multiple hundreds of millions of dollar loss.
So now skipping ahead.
So did they made $1 million? Is that what he's saying? They spent $400 million and they only made $1 million? Ooh.
And here's where he talks about that whole like Star Wars thing. Like Sony really thought this would be their Star Wars. They really thought they were going to make so much money for years and years off Concord. The situation was already amusing when we thought they spent like
right, because they had to refund the game, so they didn't even get that money. Oh.
$50 to $150 million on this game, and it's just like astronomically worse than that.
The idea behind this was, and the term apparently verbatim had been used, that Concord is the future of PlayStation.
I told you I had a feeling, because they have this whole like, oh, the graphics are so brand new. The graphics are so good. It's better than ever. It's got 60 FPS. So it was literally the flagship game, I'm betting, for the PlayStation. It was literally meant to be the flagship game that helped sell more copies of it.
That they had such major ambition for this game that it was referred to internally as a Star Wars-like project for Sony. That it can be repeatedly revisited over and over and over again, not only in cross-media, but in what we were seeing. We've already kind of seen little bits of it. So,
oh man, so they were thinking they would make their own Star Wars sci-fi-like game that would bank on helping sell PS5 Pros. And then once that did great, they could make like, you know, sequels or DLC or whatever, right? Anime, other media, they could do collabs. Like, why are you thinking this far into the future before the game even comes out?
The weekly story vignettes that they were going to release. And then, of course,
they wanted like their own MCU, basically, yeah.
Inclusion in Amazon's Secret Levels anthology. That's like just scratching the surface of it. Ironically,
This is the verbatim, I think, example of like people who are thinking monetization before they're thinking about the game itself.
Codenamed Chaos behind the scenes. And
because they're thinking, okay, the game, if it makes, you know, the game's going to make a ton of money because it's going to sell with the PS5. And then after that, we got to come up with more ways we can milk this same universe. And they haven't even made the game yet or figured out if that's going to work.
A major thing about the game is that there was, and I think we can kind of get this vibe from just the nature of the people making it and kind of the way the game reads and all that, a toxic positivity vibe. You weren't allowed to say anything.
See, like, I don't know if this is true, but it makes sense if it was, because of the fact that so much of this did not appeal to anyone, and they still went guns blazing. Like, they still went and made this. So it would make sense that nobody was allowed to outwardly say they didn't like any of the ideas or criticize it.
Apparently internally.
It seems so blindsided. I think this is the most blindsided game launch I've ever seen.
This
so
game.
It makes sense.
Okay, let's pause again because that's absolutely hilarious. First of all, that in of itself is hilarious, but the way he phrased that too, like, I think we could kind of tell because of the sort of people that worked on the game, and it's like, yeah, no kidding.
Everybody knew, but nobody was allowed to say anything about it.
Example, look how some of them acted as soon as people started criticizing the game. We had that one Concord dev calling
I'm obviously self-inserting my own opinion here from my own bias, but I think about like the one person at work that everyone dislikes, but they do their job well and you can't replace them. So it's blatant that nobody likes them. That's what it reminds me of.
Anyone who criticized the game, quote unquote.
Well, especially if these people like determined whether you had a job or not. You're not gonna criticize those people if you can't go home and, you know, put food on the table. It's not worth it.
Talentless freaks. Dude was like freaking out on their Twitter account, insulting people, and then going into protected mode. And even removing Concord from their own bio. Then there was that senior concept artist, Amanda, who saw another artist criticizing the designs of Concord. And then Amanda was saying in this post...
See, like, these people have the energy to go off on people in random Twitter comments. Imagine how much energy they have to tell you off repeatedly for, you know, a tiny crumb of criticism you gave. I'd be exhausted. They're too dense. They're just going to make your life a living hell and write paragraphs upon paragraphs. You know, it's ugh.
The character concept art team, including myself, is going through an extremely difficult time emotionally, and some on the team no longer want to work in games, design characters, or even do art anymore after this, because of this, posts like yours. Though understandable are
Oh my gosh. See, it's if you can't criticize anything, nothing can ever get better. And of course, there's a way to do that and a way to be damaging, right? But the fact that you're alleging people on the internet, like random people, random accounts, criticizing the game is going to destroy the game itself, because it's going to weigh this much on random people's emotions and make them completely quit their aspirations. Like, this is insane. Can you imagine what this person would allege against you if you criticized them and you actually did hold some type of esteem making the game?
unfortunately ill-timed. None of us know which way the wind will blow at the studio. We're worried, sick, and terrified of the future. Not only that, but we have been shouldering the brunt of the emotional labor. Yeah,
okay, well, you know what you're gonna be shouldering even bigger than that? The game absolutely obliterating the entire studio and everyone who worked on it if you don't listen to criticism. You're just stacking up bricks on top of each other until you have an entire masterpiece of failure, and all of that is gonna come crashing down.
This whole thing that I read before, I don't want to repeat the entire thing. The point is, yeah, this whole toxic positivity thing at their company really checks out. These people acted
their
like
house of cards, more like their mansion of cards. And the whole time they didn't actually realize they were using graham crackers or something and beavers were eating them. I don't know.
they never got criticism before. And then as soon as they got any,
Someone lit a match. Someone lit a match on their house of cards, and if they told anyone that it was going to burn the place down,
displayed immense levels of
it was
unprofessionalism.
stressing them out.
Returning to the
And then
clip,
they were surprised when it turned into ashes. They're like, how did this happen? And everyone else was like, I could have told you that.
we left off here.
You weren't allowed to say anything, apparently internally, about this game. About how, like, something's wrong with it, character designs are not right, and so on and so forth. They really, truly believe this was Herman Hulst's baby, apparently. And he internally was himself a massive champion of the game. So it's not that. So the reason I'm telling you all of this, it's some interesting information, of course, but it's that I had said when people were like, Concord lost $200 million. Now, people were pulling that money out because
I pity the programmers. Listen, I will say this. We don't know who was innocent. We don't know who was part of the problem, right? It could have been people at the bottom and the top. It could have been people only at the top. It could have been... I think it's a mixture, right? But when you make it a common thing that there is no room for discussion and that is an accepted norm, nothing is going to go well.
that's basically how much like some of the first party games like Ghost of Tsushima, The Last of Us Part 2, etc. kind of cost in that frame. And I was like, there's no way that it costs that much. I was saying like it cost 9 figures, probably like low $100 million, but there's no way it cost $200 million. No, it cost $400 million. So, and I am totally solid on this source, by the way. So that's why I'm willing to share it with you. Because again, I'm not really a journalist. So
how do you do this? I don't know.
big things to take away.
How do you look at this huge number and be like, that's going to work out?
$1 million loss.
It's just crazy. It's so delusional. But it makes sense if they never had people who were allowed to express criticism in any way.
Horrible shape as of 18 months ago before release. Not even monetization, no onboarding, most content not even there. The game was in such bad shape at that point that they spent the budget of it again in urgent outsourcing to get the game finished.
Just hearing this part, I wonder when this happens to other games and how often it happens. I bet you this is something that happens on other games that don't do well either.
Get the game finished from all of these different angles over an 18-month period. Internally, the game was considered part of the future of PlayStation with heavy cross-media references and a system of toxic positivity surrounding it that didn't allow anyone to meaningfully change the course of the game.
So well done, Colin, on getting all that information. And I now present to you a Kotaku journalist. I know, Kotaku. I know. Well, let's just see what he says here real quick. He says, I can corroborate the part about toxic positivity. Some sources I've spoken with blamed a head in the sand mentality carried over from the studio's Bungie roots. A sense the game would come together because the team was too good to fail. I'll have more next week. And also in Concord.
I mean, I guess this makes sense, right? It checks out with you know,
News, we had this.
how things ended
From
up.
gamesindustry.biz, they say Concord director reportedly steps down, Firewalk fears layoffs. A quote from a former developer saying, Ryan deeply believed in that project and bringing players together through the joy in it. Regardless of there being things that he could have done differently throughout development, he's a good human and full of heart.
I mean, yes, but there's plenty of people who are very great people that will make something awful because they're super prideful and you can't discuss things openly with them, right? They're probably very nice. They're just not good to work with because they're gonna do what they're gonna do, and if you question it, then that's not gonna go well.
They add, sources also claim that Firewalk staff are uncertain of the studio's future. Some reportedly believe that it could become a co-development studio on other
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Full of heart, but devoid of sense. Yep.
Sony projects, while many have allegedly shared concerns of layoffs and a possible shutdown of the studio. In Concord's official statement regarding the shutdown of the game, they did technically imply that they might relaunch the game at some point in the future. Obviously,
Why? They're gonna relaunch it to who?
that already seemed highly unlikely, and it seems to only be getting even less probable. At least it's given all of us a lot of entertainment, and it's hopefully
I feel like they're just so butthurt that they are saying they'll release it again in the future as like a weird way to band-aid their butt because, you know, being butthurt about it, not wanting to admit that it doesn't appeal to anyone. Like, I feel like they're saying that like, oh, don't worry, our you know, many fans that are so sad to see it go. It might come back in the future. People are just being mean.
been a giant wake-up
Just
call
trying to defend yourself.
for the greedy AAA industry.
Maybe that's a reach, but it's I can't see any other reason for having to say that.
For this segment, I'll leave it there. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. Consider letting me know what you think about this stuff in the comments, and if you enjoyed my coverage, then also consider liking and or subscribing to the channel. Appreciate ya, and I'll see you in the next one.
Nice. Yeah, that was a good video. That's crazy. That do be insane. I think that they know they would never do this because all
know.
it would do is that people would revisit the game as a joke, right? People would be like, oh man, I have an opportunity to play the worst game of all time to see how bad it really was. So there's no way they're gonna re-release it. I would be so surprised. There was a petition to relaunch it, but was a copy of Morbius. That's great.